Hello. Today we're going to talk about the lung. The lung is a very important organ because it is here where the exchange of gases will take place. That's why it's very important, therefore, that we talk about the lung. The lung is found behind the sternum, as you can clearly see here. The sternum is the bone found in the middle portion and is protected by the rib cage, as you can clearly see here. The rib cage, together with the sternum, protects the lung. Now bear in mind that if I were to remove the sternum and go like this, you have the right lung and the left lung. As you can clearly see here, the right lung is here. You have 3 lobes. 1, 2, 3. The left lung, you only have 2 lobes. Okay? So how many lobes do you have in the right lung? We have 3. What about on the left lung? There are 2 lobes on the left lung. Okay? So again, as I emphasized, the lung is important because this is where the exchange of gases will take place. It is therefore important that we review the respiratory system. Okay? The respiratory system is made up of the following structures. Let's review. First, if you observe, you can classify the respiratory system either as upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract begins with what? The nose, of course. Okay? And then, of course, at the back of the nose is what we call the nasopharynx. Naso means nose, pharynx means part of the throat that is behind the nose. Okay? So the nose, behind that is called the nasopharynx. You know that the pharynx or throat has 3 components. Nasopharynx, oropharynx, which is behind the oral cavity, and the laryngopharynx, which is found behind the larynx in this area here. Okay? Now, from the pharynx, the air enters what we call the larynx. Now, what are the parts of the larynx? It includes the thyroid cartilage, which is your Adam's apple here. The larynx is a cartilaginous structure which is basically found right above the trachea. Okay? The trachea is that big windpipe which is found below the larynx. So the larynx has the thyroid cartilage. Okay? It also has a signet ring cartilage called the cricoid cartilage. At the same time, it is in the larynx that you have the opening called the glottis. Okay? And in this opening called the glottis, you have your vocal cords. It's the reason why, if you notice, it is in the larynx. It's also known as the voice box because the vocal cords are responsible for vibration. Okay? So let's pretend that this is the trachea here below. Okay? If this is the trachea here, the opening of the larynx above, it's called the glottis. Okay? So the glottis is the opening of the larynx. On top of that are what we call the vocal cords. The true vocal cords and the false vocal cords. Okay? So the one that vibrates is called the true vocal cords. The false vocal cords do not vibrate. Okay? Now there is a cartilage above the glottis called the what? The epiglottis, which is designed to close the opening of the glottis whenever we swallow the food and the food goes into the esophagus. So what is the epi? Epi stands for above the glottis, which is the opening here. So these are parts of your larynx. So epi, above the glottic opening, it's called epiglottis. It's made of cartilage. It's designed to cover the glottic opening of the larynx whenever we swallow the food. Okay? Now regularly when air enters from the nose through the pharynx, then enters the larynx, it goes through the glottic opening, then into the trachea, and from there, observe, okay? So, glottis, vocal cords, epiglottis, trachea, divides into 2, the primary bronchus on the right and on the left, okay? At the same time, secondary bronchus, tertiary bronchus, and then after the tertiary bronchus you have the bronchioles, then the air sac. The larynx the trachea and the bronchi. Primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi are made of cartilage, while the bronchiole is the only one lined with smooth muscles. That's why these smooth muscles can either contract or relax, leading to bronchoconstriction, where the smooth muscles contract, and bronchodilation, where the muscles relax only in the bronchioles, because that's the only one where you find the smooth muscles. On the other hand, the air sac is lined with, of course, your squamous cells, where the exchange of gases will take place. Each air sac, there are approximately more than 1 million of them in the lung, is surrounded by your pulmonary capillaries, which is a blood vessel. Okay? So the pulmonary capillaries are blood vessels that surround your air sacs, or what we call the alveolus. Okay? So let's review. Larynx, trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchus, they're all made of cartilage, while the smooth muscles are found only in the bronchioles, while your air sacs are important because they are the alveolus, where the exchange of gases takes place. Now remember, the red blood cell can either carry CO2 or oxygen. When the CO2 carried from the pulmonary arteries brings CO2 in the red blood cell, it's like a red bus that carries CO2, which is the passenger. The CO2 will diffuse from high concentration to low into the air sac, and what do? We exhale. Now what about the oxygen? We inhale, goes inside the airways and in the air sac, and when the red bus, which is the red blood cell, now is empty, who will be the new passenger of the red blood cell of the red bus? It will be oxygen, and the oxygen now goes out, oxygenated blood goes out in the pulmonary veins, which now of course go to the left side of the heart, the aorta, and to the respective arteries to be carried to the various organs of the body. Okay? So, technically therefore it's important to differentiate upper and lower respiratory tract. Many textbooks would consider anything from the nose to the pharynx, okay, and that's part of the upper respiratory tract. Larynx and below, which includes the trachea, and of course the bronchi, and the bronchiole and the air sac, will be considered lower respiratory tract. Okay, so sometimes we see here the word upper respiratory tract infection, and of course lower respiratory tract infection. Okay? In your nose, let's review the important thing of the nose. And the nose, if you notice, inside the nose you have your what? Hair. What is the purpose of the hair? To filter the air, to prevent dust from entering the lung. What else? In your nose, if you notice, there is mucus which is secreted by the different what? The paranasal sinuses, from the frontal sinus to the ethmoid maxillary sinuses. These sinuses are lined with mucous membranes, even though they are air spaces, but they are lined with mucous membrane that secretes mucus into, that's why they're called paranasal sinuses, because they will bring the mucus into the nose, which basically will trap the dust and foreign body to prevent it from entering the lung too. At the same time, the mucus contains water, which is going to humidify the air or liquefy the air, which is very important. We do not want dry air to enter the lung. So two things: the mucus will trap the dust and foreign body. Two, it will help humidify or basically liquefy the air that enters the lung for the exchange of gases to take place. Now, if you notice too, if you look inside the nose, the nasal cavity, you have it's pinkish or red because there's a lot of blood vessels. Now, these blood vessels, or the presence of blood in the wall of the nose, is designed to warm the air. So not only are we going to humidify the air or liquefy the air through the mucus, but the presence of the blood vessels that are found inside the nose is designed to warm the air. Okay, that's very, very important. Okay, now, it's very important therefore that we have reviewed the important parts of the upper and lower respiratory tract. And that's the reason why we need to know all these things. Now, with regards to respiration, we know for a fact that in order for the air to go inside, it's called inhalation. The most important muscle is called the diaphragm, which is found between the thoracic and the abdominal cavities. It's innervated by the phrenic nerve, P-H-R-E-N-I-C nerve, which comes from the spinal cord at the level of C3, C4, C5 spinal nerves. So again, what is the nerve supply to the diaphragm? It's called the phrenic nerve. The diaphragm is responsible for inhalation. It's a primary muscle for inhalation. There could be accessory muscles for breathing, such as the sternocleidomastoid on the side of the neck, and including your trapezius muscle, but they will only be needed if you have a patient who is having labored breathing or what we call shortness of breath or difficulty of breathing. And they end up like this. Normal breathing, you only need a diaphragm. In the process of exhalation, it just needs the elastic recoil needed. So it's just like a balloon. When you put air inside the balloon will inflate, and then you release, the balloon will just... Process of recoil allows the release of air when you exhale. Okay? So inhale, you need a diaphragm. Nerve supply, the phrenic nerve. Exhale, it's just an elastic recoil process. And there's even no need for any muscles, if ever. Okay? It's very important to know about the process of inhalation and exhalation. Okay, so again, we have reviewed the lung. The lung is found behind the sternum, it's protected by the rib cage. On the right lung, you have 3 lobes. On the left lung, you have 2 lobes. The lung is also protected, by the way, by the pleura. It's also a serous membrane. You have the parietal pleura, which is attached to the thoracic wall, and the visceral pleura, which is found on the surface of the lung. And again, what you call the space between the parietal and the visceral pleura is called the pleural cavity. And what does this pleural cavity contain? The serous fluid, which is basically your pleural fluid, the same thickness as a piece of paper, designed for lubrication, which is designed to lessen the amount of friction every time you inhale and exhale. So you do not expect to find air in the pleural cavity. That can only happen if you have a gunshot wound or a stab wound or a broken rib, allowing the air to go inside through that opening and creating what we call a pneumothorax. Pneumothorax, which means presence of air, which is going to make the lung collapse because it will now push the lung to one side, causing the trachea to shift to one side on the contralateral side too, especially on X-ray. Now, if there is bleeding in the pleural cavity, it's called hemothorax. Hemo means blood. That means there is presence of your blood in the pleural cavity, and there is therefore a need for the medical doctor to insert a chest tube to be able to drain the air or the blood in that situation. Again, it's important to know all these things. Okay? By the way, before I forget, the respiratory center in the brain that controls our breathing is called the medulla oblongata. Okay? So again, it's important to know about the lung because, as we said, the exchange of gases takes place there. In the next video, we're going to talk about the different lung conditions such as COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which includes your asthma, bronchitis, emphysema. Have a good day. Thank you.